Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. In this one we're going to be continuing our projectile script, finishing that up in this video. Now unlike every other video so far, this one is not being recorded live. This is me from the future because something bad happened to the recording last time, so I have to go back and redo it. So this is going to be a little bit awkward. So I'm actually looking back at what I'm doing currently. So if you're looking at the screen right now, the thing that I'm explaining is one thing. I changed the variable to be a local variable because it's not needed outside of this function. But you want to make sure that the return node is out of the final sequence pin. If that's not the case in your game, in your project, then it won't be spawning in the correct location. So even though sequences are supposed to be happening kind of simultaneously, you do want to make sure that you set that variable before you return it. So I went ahead and slotted in a projectile base in my grenade launcher just to showcase that that's working, and I put just a random box in our projectile mesh for fun, just to show that all of that is working when you have the projectile showing up in the correct location. And then I removed it. So if you want, you can go ahead and slot something in the mesh and then go into one of your weapons and put that in. So the next thing that I'm doing here is talking about our collision responses. And we're going to be creating a brand new collision response called projectile or object type in order to get our game to recognize that we are using a projectile, because we want our game to, we can set it as just like world dynamic or something else, but what we can also do is create new object channels. So we're going to call one, name one projectile. So project settings underneath engine, it's collision. We're going to create one called projectile, and the default response is going to be block. So when we create this now, it will show up as an option, and so we can now set that as an object type. So I think I do run into a bit of a problem here. If I remember correctly, I think I go ahead and look for it. So it does show up along the bottom, so we can have our enemy make sure that that's setting to block the projectiles, but we haven't actually gone into our collision presets to be able to set anything as a projectile. So I'm going to run into that issue here. I'm going to be looking around like, oh man, where is it? I think it's somewhere. So it is two steps. You can add an object type, but it's a completely different thing to add it, to actually make it show up here in a preset. Because we want our projectile to be set as projectile, so that in our enemy, that is set to always block the projectile. So this is not a 100% necessary step. You don't have to do this every single time. But by doing it this way, you do get to specify which objects you want to ignore, overlap, and block to run off different events in your game. So Unreal comes with a decent amount of preset ones, but you can always create your own to make things more specific and tailored to you. Okay, so I finally figure out that you need to also set it as a preset. So here we are, it's in the same thing. So make sure you create an object channel named projectile in the project settings, collision. What am I waiting for? I'm probably yip-yapping all over the place. But we want to make sure that we also create one under the presets. So projectile, let's see, we want to enable collision for query and physics for this new object profile. And you can add a nice little description if you want. And then for this, we're going to say ignore. Let's see what I'm doing here. Block. Ignore the pawn. Come on, Tim. Yes. Ignore the physics body, and I think we ignore everything else. Yes. So we're ignoring everything but we're going to block world static and world dynamic. So if you remember, our enemy type, the mesh, which has the physics body on it, it's where we slotted in our physical materials. We set that, I think I'm going to go check in a second here. We set that mesh. Come on, Tim. You can do it. So as you see here, we set the mesh to be world dynamic. So our projectile type is set to be projectile, and our mesh is told to block anything that's called projectile. So that is essentially how that is working in our game. And we are a pawn. Our character is set to be a pawn, so we're going to ignore that, meaning that our bullets, our projectiles, aren't going to be hitting us. If you want to be able to blow yourself up with a rocket or something like that, you would make sure that pawn also blocks. But that's not something that we're going to be doing in this project. So on the collision in our projectile base, if you don't see it, just hit compile, and you're going to set it to be a projectile. Collision preset under collision. Projectile. Okay, with the collision, sphere collision selected. Okay, that is the actual object that's going to be driving our event for projectile stop. Now we're going to make some children off of this projectile base. We're going to make one for our sniper rifle, one for our grenade launcher, and one for our rocket launcher. So you guys know the drill by now. Right click on the base and then give it whatever name that you want. I'm doing projectile underscore and then the name of the weapon. I probably, if I wanted to be consistent, I would have done that backwards. I would have done the name of the weapon and then underscore projectile like I've done everything else, but I decided to switch it up this time. Quite honestly, I probably forgot that I named them the other way around with everything else, but we're going to start with the sniper rifle. And then underneath projectile, we're going to slot in sniper rifle projectile. So this is actually in the weapon itself. So you want to go into each and every single one of the weapon, those 3 weapons. Sniper rifle weapon, grenade launcher weapon, rocket launcher weapon. And since we set that to be a variable, you want to make sure that they are set to be projectile, not hit scan. And you want to make sure that underneath projectile, it is set to be the proper projectile children that you should have just made just now. So for the sniper rifle projectile, underneath the mesh, there is one called sniper rifle ammo, and it's this little bullet. And we're going to rotate this so that it faces forward and increase the size. So -90, it looks like in the Y. And then I make this probably like 6 or so times the size. You can make it however big that you want it to be. So I just make it big enough so that it kind of fits around our collision. But you can resize the collision. Just know that if you resize the collision within the child, it will also shrink the mesh because the mesh is a child of that. We're going to change the speeds to be 12,000 and the gravity scale to be 0.1. So there's not going to be a whole lot of drop off, and this one's going to go really fast. We want to make sure that is dealing radius damage for our sniper rifle is turned to be false. For weapon stats, I'm going to slot in 100 damage, even though I believe that the variable controlling that exists within the weapon. I think that's one that matters. And then for impact effect, put sniper rifle impact effect. Like I said, these ones, it might not matter as much. You might not need to set it in here because it might be grabbing that information from the weapon blueprint. But, you know, it's good practice. It doesn't do any harm to slot in the amounts of damage and that impact effect in the projectile as well. Can't do any harm. So a lot of this is just making sure that the variables are set to the correct type. A lot of times if you might have some sort of error, it might be that you don't have the projectile slotted in or the impact effect slotted in. You might have it the sniper set to be a hit scan when it's really should be a projectile. So if certain little things like that aren't working, the first thing that I would just do is to check your variables in your blueprints to make sure that they're actually set to be the correct things. Because when you have so many weapons, it can get a little bit confusing. So we haven't fixed the scope. We'll do that in a later video, but if it should be shooting that bullet out of the front of the gun now, and it should be pretty visible to see that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to shoot this guy. I'm going to get an error when I close this down. In a previous video, I think I mentioned to make sure that we change a certain setting for the physical materials not being able to be returned correctly, and this is the error that I was talking about. So I get a little bit confused here. I'm like, what the heck? So our damage isn't working, but it's weird. So it is still firing off a impact effect. It is still showing up a damage number, even though the damage number is 0. And it is still showing a hit marker as if we hit something, but there is something wrong with it. So the last part of this video is me going to be live again. So hopefully you were able to bear through this part of the video. Once again, I apologize for this happening. I just lost the audio, so I have to re-record this part. But the last like minute or two of this video will be the live version again, and you will see me showing you the solution to this error. Okay, so let's go ahead and fast forward to that and move on with our lives. Okay, so more awkwardness coming from me. Okay, so you know what I told you? You need to check on a certain variable so you don't get errors, so that the computer won't recognize which physical material you have. Well, I did the right thing in telling you that that was going to happen, but I didn't tell you which I didn't tell you which one to turn on. So if I uncheck this right here, okay, I grab the sniper rifle, I pick it up, I shoot it into the ground, okay. Notice it still did the decal and all of everything, but it'll say access none, trying to read property, physical material, and it'll show in our impact effect base how the emitter, the sound, and the decal is not working. When you get an access none error, it means that it's trying to find something that isn't there. So in this case, it's looking for a physical material that was hit, and it can't find it. So the computer is still doing something, and most of the time it will still actually do the correct thing, but you're confusing it. So in the projectile base, and you'll also notice that the damage numbers don't work if you don't do this. So in the collision of our projectile base, just search return. If true, component sweeps return material of their hit result. I do not know why in God's name this is not turned on by default. But you need to do this. So put return material on move. Turn that on in your collision settings. So now if we shoot into the ground, this still all works. But if we walk up to our enemy and we hit them, you get the correct sound and the damage numbers and all of that. And when we hit escape, we don't get errors. Okay, that is a crucial step. I can't believe I ran into the same error again. But I mean, you do want, I guess you do want simulate generate hit events too. I don't see why you wouldn't. Yeah. Okay. So cool. We got that fixed. We can move on with our lives now. All right. So yeah, let's figure out where were we. In all honesty, that might be where I can just end the video because, oh, look at me. I'm still hitting headshots. Oh, dang it. In the next video, we'll fix the sniper rifle to get it to actually do stuff and build that out. But yeah, I mean, right now we are shooting projectiles out of our gun. That all works fine. So we'll create the sniper rifle and then we'll move on to doing explosions and then we'll pretty much be done. So we're in the home stretch here. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next one.